So there's been a lot of talk lately around incrementality in the context of meta ads and how the different attribution models actually relate to incrementality. So if you are looking to find out the precise spot, or which you can call the Goldilocks zone, where you have just the right level of incrementality that is possible, then you would also have to look at the different attribution models, because how you set or what attribution model you set is actually going to have an impact on that. So there's been a lot of discussion lately, and the discussion has often been around this sort of graph. In a previous video, I had also discussed this on LinkedIn. So as you can see here along the x-axis, you have the different attribution windows. The first quadrant here consists of the click-oriented attribution windows and the view-oriented ones, together with longer, date ranges of clicks are in the are in the second quadrant. And in the first quadrant, you also have heavy exclusions of past purchases, people who have made any kind of valuable taken any kind of valuable actions on the website, and there are no exclusions in the negative y-axis. So the incremental zone is being claimed, perhaps from an anecdotal, something which is purely anecdotal, or perhaps from an experimental point of view. People have found out that it's really the click-oriented attribution models along with heavy exclusions is where you get most incrementality. So this is of course intuition, right? And also maybe, like I said, just based on very limited amount of experimentation and anecdotal information. But if you were to test this, if you want to confirm this, just how would you approach this? You would ideally want to have some sort of framework, and that this is exactly what this video is going to do. It's going to introduce to you a framework, a template, a done-for-you template that you can actually use to start looking at incrementality and interaction effects. So yeah, this first slide here just consists of this particular graph, and so I've just stated the problem. I've introduced the problem here, and I will just jump into the solution. And the solution also consists of the graph, just for a reference. But the first thing that you have to do is to grab this data essentially. So the store revenue is essentially the completely unadulterated revenue data which you get from your store backend. And these columns just consist of the revenue according to the different attribution models. So a 28-day click and a 7-day view, 7-day click, 7-day view, 7-day click, 1-day view, 28-day click, 7-day click, and 1-day click are the different meta ads attributions. And these, according to these attribution models, what are the different revenues that have actually been attributed to Facebook. So you want to have all these revenues. By the way, this is real data, and all of this is actually in thousands. Which one of these would be the closest predictor of store revenue? That's what we're trying to find out. So as you can see here, it makes sense that as the window is getting longer, we actually have more revenue getting attributed to Meta. And as the window gets shorter and as it moves away from view towards only clicks, purely clicks, we actually have a smaller amount of revenue. So the store revenue, by the way, is not necessarily always very close to the day click. As you can see here from the data itself, it says that it's the most incremental zone, because of course incrementality means that if you are actually adding real value, right, for every additional dollar of spend. But as you can see here, there are data points like this. For instance, on this particular day, the store revenue is actually significantly higher, almost more than 3 times higher actually, than the 1-day click revenue attributed to Meta. So this is the data set. First of all, this is something that you have to download from Meta, and you have to plug it in here. The next thing that you really need to do is to incorporate something called incrementality factors. So we obviously looked at this chart, right? So we saw that there are a couple of things that we're looking at: exclusions and no exclusions. In this model, I have kept it purely between attribution and incrementality. Maybe in a future model, I'll try to include the concept of exclusions, but that's relatively straightforward. Okay, so let's just imagine you are doing exclusions of past purchases. It's a very common practice. So once you've done that, you're really now left with just tackling the problem of incorporating incrementality into this regression model. And the way to do it is it's not actually very straightforward. I have read up on this. I've also tried to figure out myself, and I've consulted a lot of great online resources and books, and I understood that one of the best ways to do it is to take recourse of interaction effects. So interaction effect is essentially a way to consider multiple variables and their as the name suggests, interaction effects, as in how those variables are interacting together, and you basically construct a new variable out of that interaction. And one of the simplest ways of doing it is to take multiplication. So what we are going to do here is take each attribution window based revenue, that's attributed to Meta according to different attribution windows, and then we're going to multiply the value for each of these data points with a particular incrementality factor for that particular window. So the incrementality factor for say so the different incrementality factors that we have taken, so these are actually some dummy values I've shown here, and the reason I've just shown dummy values is just for your plain understanding. Of course, we have a more complicated combination of click-based and view-based attribution windows, but this is how essentially for different attribution windows you can assign incrementality factors. So so the way this regression model really works is first of all, just like in the case of regular regression, linear regression models, you have a constant value, and then you have the coefficients multiplied by the individual variables. So from beta 0 to beta 3 xi3, you can essentially call it you can see that it's just according to your regular linear regression model. But from there on, you have a couple of thereafter you have a couple of interaction terms essentially. So these are variables which are using the interaction effect, where you have a constant, but you also have a multiplication of two variables just to give you a combined effect of these two variables. So you can say that xi1 for instance could be your revenue value for this particular attribution window, and then xi2 could be the value corresponding, the incrementality value corresponding to this particular value, this particular data point within this attribution window. So what we have considered, by the way, is that for a particular attribution window, the incrementality factor remains constant across all data points, and I think that makes sense. Why would the incrementality factor vary across different days? You have the different incrementality factors that have been plugged into the data set. So these columns remain the same as before. These main columns rather, not that one. So you have the basic attribution window revenue, and then I'm plugging in the incrementality factor and then just multiplying these two together to get a new interaction effect variable. So that's what I'm doing essentially for all of these attribution revenue windows, and I have plugged in 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, and 0.8 as incrementality factors right up to the one-day click one, and then I've got the interaction variable corresponding to each of these. So the reason why I obviously have increased gradually from here, as you can understand, is because of the hypothesis. So this is, by the way, a hypothesis, and that's why we're testing it, and we're going to test the efficacy of this model, and we're going to also look at some of the limitations that arise out of it. But the hypothesis essentially arises from this particular chart that we just discussed at the start, right? So click best ones, and of course with heavy exclusions, which we have considered as a constant anyway. So we are just taking that as a granted. So incrementality is being considered as possible when, or is being considered as more probable when you have more click-based attribution windows. So or models. So that's why, as you can see, as more and more, and not just click-based, but the shorter range of click-based windows. So as we move towards one-day click, it's actually going to increase, right? So the incrementality factor is increasing, so that it's the highest for one-day click. And as it moves away from one-day click, it's actually getting lower and lower, and that's why we have the lowest incrementality factor 0.2 assigned to 28-day click and 7-day view. That's it, and that gives us our revised data set. Now let me just briefly talk about this. So the revised data set, as you can see, consists of only the interaction terms. And this is something that I also had to figure out, and I had to try different iterations here. So there were multiple ways of doing this. This could have been this thing that we see here in the incrementality tab could have been our entire data set, by the way. Okay, so we could have used everything here. The problem there would have been that these were of extremely different scales, because the incrementality factor itself, even though a variable in its own right, is actually is an extremely low value compared to the revenue values. So the interaction effect values themselves actually represent, because of the name and because of the concept itself, that it's incorporating the information provided by the attribution window revenues and the incrementality factor values. So since this combination or interaction effect variables already consist information from these two variables, um, I found out that it's probably it's actually giving, at least for this data set, it's giving the best possible outcome. Because in whatever way I was trying to do normalization or standardization in order to scale the data, in order to, take care of the fact or account for the fact that there's a massive difference in scales, and that's understandable because incrementality factor has to be in a simple percentage or a simple ratio, as is the case here. It's a simple, very small decimal number. Unless one, it will naturally be very difficult to, I mean, not difficult, but the scaling could actually mean that we would get a skewed result. Sometimes that does happen, but yeah, I mean, typically, it should not. But in this case, we found out that, it's going to be a better idea to just take the interaction effect values only and dropping the original revenue values and the incrementality factor values as well. And that actually serves a purpose, like I said, because this is already containing information, a combined information from both, our main variables. So, so now we are left with actually just 6 input variables, which are going to be our predictors, and then we're going to look at store revenue. So just to pause here a little bit and talk about how, machine learning models. So this is essentially a very simple, very, possibly the simplest form of machine learning model, linear regression. The only additional or advanced layer that we have sort of added onto it is the interaction effect. But otherwise, it's a very straightforward model, as straightforward as it can get. And simpler is often better. But the point I'm trying to make is, even in its simplest form, it can be actually used in multiple ways. And again, this is something that I just, I'd spoken about a little bit in my earlier introduction video to this on this topic. And there I had, just touched upon the fact that regression can be used as a way to find out correlation, to understand correlation, but it can also be used to, predict values. So we're going to actually try and do both here, and we're going to see what's the outcome of the same. Okay, so there we are. We're going to try to find out the relation between these values taken together, because it's going to be a multivariate multivariate regression, linear regression, but a multivariate one. And then we're going to see the impact on store revenue, and we are also going to try to predict store revenue on the basis of the information contained in this entire input data set. So like I said, 100 data points here for 100 weeks, essentially. 100 days again. I just keep making that mistake. Yeah, it's not days, but it's not weeks, but days. So there we go. So that's our revised data set. And now we are just looking at the regression analysis output. So by the way, how do we do this? This you can do in multiple ways. You can use something called linest. So if I just type in here, you can just use this particular inbuilt Google Sheet function, which helps you calculate, the regression. It just helps you carry out regression analysis, and it can give you the output for a large number of metrics. It can give you the coefficients. It can give you the F statistic, the R squared, some of the regression sum of squares, and quite a few other useful things like errors, standard errors, and all of that. So this is useful, and this is something that can be done as well. However, I have carried out the regression analysis using Python separately, and I've just dumped the results here. Okay, but like I said, a very simple way of doing this is to actually use the linest model, and I can just show you how you can Linus function rather, and you can just choose what the way it works. You can just go to help here if you just want to look at how the input has to be done. You first have to choose the y value, and then you have to choose the x value. You just can take a look at the syntax here, and that will just make it very clear to you in just a second. So there you go, the known data y, the known data x, and then you can say that okay, whether or not it's going to be the intercept is going to be forced to be 0, which of course you don't want to do. You really want to consider the constant value as well. So you would typically keep that as false, and then the last one, verbosity, will be true, meaning that you will get a lot of detailed information like the ones I just said, not just the coefficients, but also the RSS of the regression sum of squares, the standard errors, and F statistic, and a lot of other such values. So you just have to choose the entire ranges of the data here. So the entire Y range here, and then the entire X range here, starting from A2 right down to I think F101, and you have to just input that here as the arguments for the Linus function, and then you just have to give false and then true, and yeah, that's it. You will actually have all the data populated here. But what I've done instead is the problem with that output is that it's not labeled. The values will just be raw values, and nothing is going to be mentioned here. So you will actually have to look up the syntax of it and understand which value is which. But for your ease of understanding, I have actually done the values here. So as you can see here, constant and the different input variables, the 6 of them, the coefficients for each of them have been given, the standard errors have been given, and the p-values have been given. So for a confidence interval of 95% for a 5% margin of error, you would typically want to have p-values, which is going to be p-values which are going to be lesser than 0.05 or 0.05 or lesser, in order for you to be confident about their statistical significance. So as you can see here, there are only a couple of them. And interestingly, it's not just the one-day click, right? So we discussed how the hypothesis is claiming that it's going to be primarily the one-day click, and mostly up to the 7-day click where incrementality really lies. But in our data set, and we see after regression analysis, it's not so much the 7-day click, which actually has much lesser statistical significance, and even the coefficient is lesser. But it's rather the 28-day click and the 28-day click and the one-day click, which have relatively higher coefficients and very decent p-values, because these are both less than 0.05. So both of these are actually statistically significant, and that's why the core analysis is that the variable which is most closely linked to store revenue is one-day click, which is fine. That's what we thought in the hypothesis, and it clearly has a very good coefficient and the lowest, and which actually has the pretty good coefficient and a pretty low p-value. It doesn't actually have the it has the lowest p-value, right? So that's why it's actually been considered here as the variable which is most closely linked, because it's the most statistically significant predictor, right? It does not actually have the highest coefficient, interestingly. So the 28-day click has a higher coefficient, but that's fine. I mean, that's not the only thing that should be looking for. We should be looking at p-value, but it's also important to look at other things. Okay, so there is the F statistic, and this along with R squared, actually these give us a very good understanding of how well the model is actually a good fit in order to predict, or in order for it to actually come up with a good understanding of the data. And so you can see that the R squared value here is actually very low. So the R squared value, the closer it is to 1, the better it is. Okay, and as we can see in this case, that it's actually very, very low. And the R squared value being very low means that the model is actually not doing a very good job in order to explain how store revenue really varies using the input variables that we have considered, the different interaction effect variables between the attribution revenues and incrementality factors. So that's not a good sign, and that means that this model actually needs tweaking. So maybe we have to assign different incrementality factors. We have to try out different versions of that. And for that, actually, a more advanced way of running machine learning models has to be done, where we have to do different. We have to resort to different kinds of techniques in order to find this a better way of fine tuning this model and coming up with better incrementality factors that will actually give us a much better R squared value, which gives you the explainability of this model. Similarly, the F statistic, is supposed to be as high as possible in order for the model to be good. So the closer it is to 1, in this case, as we can see, it's pretty close to 1. It shows that it's not generally a very good, it's not explaining it very well. But nonetheless, we still see that, so I have, like I said, I tried out different iterations already with this particular data set. So it's again not a very big data set. So in an advanced machine learning model, you would actually consider so many things. You would also consider the number of data points, and you would also try to see if there's any kind of multicollinearity, which means that if there's any kind of interdependency or correlation between the independent variables. Because right now we are considering that all of these variables are essentially independent from one another. But yeah, that's not been tested rigorously here. As you can see, we have straight away jumped into the regression analysis, considering these as predictor variables or input variables. So that's one consideration. The other consideration is the value of the incrementality factors, and then we can also consider whether or not linear regression itself, even though it's a multivariate linear regression, but whether or not that's actually a very good model. We can try out other models as well. So usually in such cases, people often go for models like random forest, because there are very good hyperparameter tuning capabilities, and you can use multiple simulations to come up with the right kind of with the right hyperparameters, just the right ones, again, to get into the Goldilocks zone that gives you the right the best model, the most explainable model, a model with the highest level of explainability. But without going into that level of complexity, that would have been very difficult to incorporate in a Google Sheet. So that's why I've kept it to that just that enough level of complexity, a Goldilocks zone of its own, in a sense, which will actually be a sort of a done for you template which you can use and sort of generate an understanding of the close relation between the attribution models and the incrementality factors that you're assigning. So what you can do is just play along with the different incrementality factors. You can change around, try around different models here, or other different values here in this model for incrementality factors, and see which one is working best. Okay, which one is giving you the highest R squared and a higher F statistic value. But you should definitely look at the p-values and the coefficients as well, in order to make a good sense and a good overall assessment of this particular model. The sum of squares also has to, the lower it is better, because of course this is sum of residuals, or the sum of errors essentially. So that's pretty much what this is all about. This model is all about, and I think it's a very nice introductory machine learning approach to understanding the close relationship between two very complicated things, really, because attribution really, solving the problem of attribution isn't a case of precision science. It's not something that you will achieve 100% with anything. It's something that you will have to run iterations with, and just you have to get better and better through machine learning. And at an advanced level, you can use Python. Like I said, I have done this regression analysis itself using Python. So if you want to actually get into those sort of things, you can do that. You just have to get in touch with me, and I will, we can discuss this further, or you can look up other resources as well. But this is a good starting point, I'd say, for dealing with this problem. So the next step, so we have done the first part of the work that I spoke about, regression having two main functionalities here. The way we have used it, one is to actually find a correlation and to explain the relationship between the attributed revenue values according to different attribution models and the store revenue. And the second one would be to actually predict for future values, for unknown values, right? For unknown values of these input variables, and predict store revenue from there. So for this, I have actually, as you can see here, this is the prediction. Let me actually show the value first. So these are the input values. So as you can see, in this case, it has just increased a little bit. So this is the case where, probably the spend has increased, and the attributed revenue values have also been on the higher side according to all the attribution models. And in that case, what's going to be the attributed store revenue? The attributed store revenue is 190. Okay, so that's the prediction. So the prediction here in this case has actually been done. As you can see, for all these are all empty cells, but it was empty here, and that's why the value comes here. So the way this actually comes is from a very useful extension. So I just wanted to give you a taste of something that's pretty ready-made for you, and again, something that you can do for regression analysis itself. It's called Simple ML for Sheets. Okay, you can just click Start here, and then you can just go through a very basic settings. So if I just click on it here, it will actually give you an option to do this very simple analysis, and you can just do it for yourself and arrive at the prediction. But like I said, this may not necessarily, so you have to click on predict missing values, but it may not necessarily give you the most accurate value straight away. So you may have to do those the different tweaks, like I said, and maybe even move on to a higher order model. So this prediction actually has not used simple linear regressions because this was a missing value, right? So I've just tried to find a missing value. So you have the store revenue, which is the column with empty cells, and then as the source columns, you have chosen, I've chosen all the input variables as the source columns, and then the learning algorithm here is gradient boosted tree. So this is a machine learning model, like I was just talking about, that there can be more advanced systems and frameworks that you can use. And in this case, this is a machine learning model that's actually doing the prediction, and then you just hit predict, and this is actually what you're going to get. So 190 here is a prediction that's done by advanced, gradient-based, boosting algorithms. So what is gradient descent model? What is what is different? What are the different kinds of boosts? And how that actually works. So that I will probably explain in future videos, and but those will be for more advanced users who are ready to sort of start using Python. But for those who are just happy going with the Google Sheets, I think this is a good idea. This is a good start, a good place to actually get started with understanding the relationship between incrementality and attribution models on Facebook. So yeah, I hope this was useful. This is something that will probably take more than just a couple of videos, and this is a topic that I will keep dwelling upon. So if you have any questions, any suggestions, or any kinds of inputs at all, just feel free to reach out to me, comment below the video, and we can definitely get into a very useful and interactive discussion. So yeah, do like, share, and subscribe if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.